Bring the meeting to order, please. Excuse me. Sit down and back, please. Bring the meeting to order. We're going to stand, start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Bristol Township Zoning Hearing Board. Let me introduce you to a few people before we get started. To my left is our solicitor, Ken Fetterman. We also have the director of L&I, Bob McTeague. We also, our stenographer is Cindy Oliveira. I'm going to call the board members in attendance. Mark DeMarcus.
Here.
Colleen Dunn.
Here.
Jim McMahon, here. Okay, before we get started, I got a couple of things we got to take care of as a board. We got a few continuances that we got to take care of. Let's see, number 2 on the agenda, Kristen Stites is 60 Beach Tree Road, Levittown, PA. Bob McTeague, the director of L&I, received a letter, which was in our packet. I'm not going to read the whole letter for you, but she's looking for a continuance for next month, Bob, for November.
Correct, yeah.
I need a motion from the board.
I'll make a motion.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Okay, next is number 3 on the agenda. Nancy Chen and Sahu Chen, 3220 Carroll Court, Bensalem, PA. Mr. McTeague, as well as our solicitor, Ken Fetterman, and myself received an email asking for the continuance. So I need a motion from the board for continuance for November.
I'll make a motion.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Last for continuance is number 5. It's Iconic Motors LLC. Sedano Menendez, 41 Glenridge Avenue. I also, Mr. McTeague received a call from them and also an email, as well as our solicitor, Ken Fetterman, and myself. I need a motion for continuance.
I'll make a motion.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. All right, so it looks like we got a packed house tonight. So listen, no outbursts, no speaking while the meeting's going on. When the applicant's done, people in the audience will have their chance to speak for or against the application. All right, so let's get started. See, first on the agenda is Jeffrey Bernacki, 41 Inkberry Road, Levittown, PA. Please come on up.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Fournier, representing Mr. Bernacki. I noticed a lot of people are smiling today. Wasn't that great weather? It's real nice out there. Anyways, this is an application where Mr. Bernacki wants to build a 20-foot wide by 10-foot deep porch to facilitate his disability and future wheelchair access. We had served parties in interest.
Can you bring it up? Thank you.
By certified and regular mail.
Okay, it's in order.
And exhibit 1 and 2, this is not only the notice, but it shows the dimensions of the front house. Front house looks
Jim, if I may, just clean something up real fast.
Absolutely.
Jeff, this is a single-family dwelling?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you're only seeking a front yard setback for a single-family dwelling, right?
Yeah, it's really the setback from from the sidewalk.
So the only variance you're seeking is from 205-29E1, not F1, because F1 pertains to a multiple family dwelling. Just want to clear that up for the board.
That may have been a typo. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I got F1 at the bottom there. No idea what F1 is.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
All right, okay, continue.
So we're requesting that the board approve this variance.
Jim, can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Colleen.
Hi. Can you tell me how far from the sidewalk and from the street this porch would be, if constructed? I did see it, it's just not drawn on there? Or it's just not noted on the plot plan?
Yeah, that's where you're.
Right now, I have 28 feet from the front of the house to the sidewalk. I'm asking for 10 feet out, will give me 18 feet after the porch is up with the railing. So I'm basically 7 feet. The 3 foot that I could put the porch now isn't big enough for a chair and assistance to get, you know, around my wife or another person. That's why I'm seeking the 10-foot.
I understand, I just want to make sure that it's safe enough from the street once
Yeah,
constructed.
yeah, from the street, it's actually farther. When he says 28 feet, that's from the sidewalk. From the curb, I think that's an extra 10 feet. So we're looking at about 28 feet from the curb.
I don't know,
Doesn't say that clearly on the plot plan. You have to do the math when you look at it, yeah.
maybe I'm missing something. Where's the proposed ramp going, or future proposed ramp going to go? Can you tell?
It's an aluminum ramp. It would go right in the front.
Okay,
It's going to have 2 posts, 10 feet in, and then a 5-foot opening
I'm sorry, 2 posts.
with a 5-foot opening.
okay, so is it,
Would the ramp be contained within the porch itself or on the exterior of the porch?
I'm sorry?
The ramp, would that be?
The ramp would be outside.
So an additional 4 feet off of that?
That, well, it would be like 3 feet would be the ramp, but it would be removable only when leaving the property, so it's not in anybody's way.
so the opening of the ramp's going towards the driveway, not onto the sidewalk?
Yes, I can put it on the side to get right to the driveway.
Anybody else have any questions?
I do. I'm not giving you a hard time. I just want to make sure that it's
Fine.
safe and safe enough from the street.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'd rather you ask. I'd rather make sure everybody's on the same page.
All right, anything else, Bob?
No, that's it, Jim.
Anybody from the audience like to come up and speak for or against this application? Okay. All right, I need a motion from the board.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second? Okay, Colleen Dunn.
Thank you.
Mark DeMarcus.
Yes.
Jim McMahon, yes. Okay, now you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank him.
Have a good evening.
Okay. All right, next up. Denali Enterprises LLC, 38 Inwood Road, Levittown, PA, requesting variance for chapter 20561. I won't go through, there's several variances here, so, okay, come on up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Bryce McGuigan here from Begley Carlin on behalf of the applicant, Denali Enterprises LLC. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. We're here for the property that's located at 11 Wilson Avenue here in Bristol Township. The property, for the record, is 1.59 acres and is currently zoned heavy manufacturing, part of the M2 zoning district. There are presently no improvements on the property, which is generally wooded. Before we get into the details of the presentation, there are a few quirks about the property that I think it's worthwhile to go over at the outset. Bob, can you go to the next page? Thanks. So first, the property consists of two defined parts. Here on my little clicker, we're showing the main area here, which is approximately 1.3 acres. And then there is a little jog here, and then another smaller area of the parcel that's essentially unbuildable. Together, like I said, those total the 1.59 acres at issue. The other interesting detail is we have an existing detention basin, which is located to the south side of the property, which also, because of that, is unbuildable. The last thing I'd like to point out is there is a paper street that is not opened to the rear of the property that's 50 feet wide, and that's obviously lies between our property and the residential neighborhood to the rear. Our plan here tonight is to construct a small warehouse structure on this M2 zone property. The warehouse will measure 10,000 square feet. The building will be home to my client's personal business, MER, that stands for Mobile Equipment Repair, Industrial Contractors, which specializes in off-site repair work for manufacturing and other business entities. Upwards of 90% of the work is done off property. Nothing's really done there, and if there's any work done on property, as you'll hear from Mr. Tepper, who's the owner of both the property and the business, about only 10% or so, and it's all indoors. The proposed warehouse, as you'll see and as Mr. Dumack will discuss in a bit more detail in a few moments, the proposed warehouse will be far below the maximum size building allowed on the property. In essence, we are at 14.4% building coverage, where otherwise a similarly situated property will be allowed up to 35%, so only 40% of the size that's actually allowed by the ordinance. We're also going to be only at 44% impervious, where 65% would otherwise be allowed. So we are intentionally underdeveloping this property. And like I said, that is intentional. The smaller size of the actual structure will allow us to maintain not only the existing detention basin, but also a decent amount of the existing wooded areas on the property. It also allows us to actually maintain all the general setbacks that are required by the M2 zoning district. However, due to the odd configuration of the lot, the existing natural resources, and the fact that the detention basin that I previously noted occupies a large chunk of this buildable lot, we do require a number of variances. So briefly, before I kick things over to my witnesses, let me just go through the 4 variances at issue. The first is to permit the warehouse to be located 30 feet from a residential district instead of the 100 feet otherwise required by the ordinance. Number 2, to permit building setback lines to be measured from the property line rather than from the natural resources currently existing on the site. 3, to permit the existing vegetation to remain in the buffer area and to allow the removal of a portion of existing vegetation, namely that where the building is proposed to be located and in the immediate area surrounding that building. The last variance is to not require 2 designated loading spaces or loading docks. So those are the 4 variances that we're asking for tonight. We are not asking for any relief for the warehouse to exist. That is a expressly permitted use in this district. So to
Kindly request
No, no, hold on, ma'am, hold on. I stated at the beginning of this meeting that you will get your chance. You wait till the applicants are done, and then you can speak up, okay? Thank you.
Right. I just hope everyone can hear me. That's one, yeah, okay. If I speak a little louder, is that better? Okay, my apologies. So, again, these 4 variances to discuss in a little bit more detail. With respect to the 100-foot distance requirement, we cannot legally meet that while building a reasonable permitted industrial use of the property. Fortunately, because of the unique layout of this property, there's going to be approximately 80 feet of wooded area between our proposed building and the nearest residence. So the 50-foot paper street, which we are not touching, not doing anything with, that is a paper street, that's gonna remain a paper street and remain wooded. So we have that 50, and there's gonna be an additional 30 feet from the property line to our building. A majority of that will also remain wooded. The only part of that that will not be wooded is going to be what's right next to the building that we have to in order to actually build and in order to maintain our building. And the second variance request, which is to allow the existing vegetation to remain. Again, we don't want to touch any of that wooding or wooded property. And the only reason we would is if the township wants us to put additional plantings there or make any changes. We are committed to maintaining that approximately 80 feet of wooded area between us and the nearest residence. The third variance, like I said, we are going to require a variance allowing us to measure the setbacks from the property line instead of the natural resources. As our engineer, Mr. Dumack, will testify later, and he has a nice plan that shows it, if we have to measure setbacks from the natural resources, we literally cannot build an actual reasonable, useful industrial building on this site. Can't be done. And the last variance that we need is for to not require the 2 designated loading docks. First of all, we're asking for that, as you'll hear, because my client's business doesn't require it. But secondly, it's moving forward, any business that would go in there, whether we sell it in forever, how long from now, or whether Joe unfortunately passes away and some other business comes in, not having loading docks will prevent actual heavy trucking from not being used there and from not cluttering traffic on Wilson Avenue. So those are the variances at issue. And obviously, I know that there are quite a few people here tonight who are interested in this project. I understand that, my client understands that, and Mr. Dumack understands that. As we move forward tonight, I will be more than happy to address any questions, any comments, or any concerns that are raised by the public. As you'll hear, Joe doesn't want to pick any fights tonight. He doesn't want to cause any issues. He just wants to find a way to use the industrial property that he legally owns. This project is our attempt to do just that, to move forward with an approved, a permitted industrial use that makes sense for the property, but also represents a use that has a minimal impact on the surrounding area. I have with me tonight Joe Tepper, who's the owner of the property and the owner of MER Industrial, which will be the business moving into the new building. I also have Heath Dumack of Dumack Engineering, who's our professional, who designed all the plans and the pretty PowerPoint you see before you this evening. Unless there are any preliminary questions from the board, I'd like to call Mr. Tepper as our first witness.
Anybody have any questions right now?
Point of order, if you would, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to request party status on behalf of my client.
Yeah, Ken.
It's granted. Tom Panzer.
Oh, Tom, sorry,
Yes.
go ahead. First,
Yeah.
introduce yourself. And then
Thank you. Yeah, Thomas Panzer on behalf of Mr. Fred Ramirez, Pan American Behavioral Health, an immediate adjacent property owner.
Okay, and that's why you're requesting party status?
It is.
No objection. So with that, the applicant would like to call Joseph Tepper.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Is the green light on in there?
Yes.
Hello? Gotcha.
Yeah, it's not as easy as it looks. Evening, Joe. Please introduce yourself to the board for me.
Joe Tepper, owner of MER Industrial and Denali Enterprises, owner of the property.
All right, so you heard everything I said to the board a few minutes ago. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you understand everything I said?
Yes,
Do you agree with everything I said?
yes,
Are you ready to adopt the statements I made to the board as a portion of your testimony here this evening?
yes, I do.
All right, so let me ask you a few other questions. Just like you mentioned, you own the property that's up there on the board, is that right?
Yes,
And the property we're here for this evening.
yes,
All right, and you also own MER Industries.
yes, I do.
All right, how long have you owned that company?
9 years.
All right, and what does it do?
We're industrial contractors, so we go out to large industrial manufacturing facilities and do large maintenance repairs, new equipment installation.
And that business right now, it's currently right up the road?
Correct.
All right, and the goal here is to to construct the building that we see on those plans and move MER Industrial to this property, is that right?
That is correct.
So let's discuss your business a little bit so the board has a better idea and the public has a better idea of the business that we're proposing will be a neighbor essentially. So about how many employees do you have full-time?
I have 10 full-time employees.
All right, and most of your business, is it a fair statement to say that occurs in the field?
Out of 10 right now, 6 of them are on long-term contracts out in the field right now.
All right, how about the other 4?
They're on day-to-day contracts with somebody calling with a breakdown or a repair that we need to make.
Now, can you explain exactly how does that work? If I own a business that needs a repair, it needs MER services, how would that work?
So if a local manufacturer gives us a call and says, we have a piece of equipment that broke down, I need a guy out here tomorrow, can you get us out to them? So I got guys at home that were dispatched from their house, they have their vehicles at their house, they go directly to the job, unless they need to pick something particular up at the shop, a tool or something that they may need.
So on occasion, employees will come to the office, come to the shop in the morning, grab what they need, and go out on repair, and potentially come back to the business at the end of the day?
They could, if they go out to a job site and find out that they need something else, they'll come back, or if they see that they may need to bend a piece of metal or something at the shop to take back to that facility, yes.
So generally speaking, for most of the work that MER does, your shop sort of serves as a glorified storage facility, is that right?
That is correct.
All right. And that's why we're seeking approval for this warehouse use, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So, and I believe as you said, your employees typically take their vehicles home with them at the end of the day, is that right?
That is correct.
And in terms of vehicles, what type of vehicles are we talking about?
Chevy trucks, 2,500 trucks, service trucks.
So just kind of modified pickup trucks?
Yep, with a utility body on the back, yeah.
So at the end of the day, if your business moves into this location, are you going to be storing trucks there?
No, if somebody's on vacation, then I put the truck in the shop for the week, but other than that, I can't leave them outside, so they go to their houses.
Right.
We don't leave them outside.
And then with respect to materials or equipment, those are going to be in the building too?
Correct, all tools and equipment in the shop.
So generally speaking, this building, most of the time, as far as these residents are concerned, are they going to see, hear, smell anything going on this property?
They should not, no.
With respect to, you did say that, you know, if people are picking up items or maybe there is a little bit of work that needs to be done on site. Does that happen outside or does that happen inside your building?
Inside the building.
So is it a fair statement to say that your business is a self-contained sort of operation?
Yes.
Now, as to the building itself, switching focus here, we're proposing a 10,000 square foot warehouse, is that right?
That is correct.
All right. Now, you heard what I said earlier, and you're familiar with your property, and you know you can build a larger building technically, but you're not doing that, is that right?
That is correct.
And is that partially because your business doesn't need a larger building?
That is correct.
But the other part is because, especially for this site, building a smaller building allows you to maintain a lot of these natural resources that I discussed earlier. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So including some of those wooded parts of your lot, including the detention basin.
Correct.
And you're not proposing to do anything to that detention basin, is that right?
Yes, not even that. add to it.
All right. And you're not touching the paper street behind your property, is that right?
That's correct.
And with respect to the additional 30 feet from the property line to your proposed building, you're going to leave as much of that wooded as you physically can, is that correct?
That's correct.
And we're not proposing any changes unless in discussions with the township and the township engineer, they ask for changes, correct?
That is correct.
Because the goal here is you want to maintain a wooded stretch of property and stretch of land between you and between the neighbors behind you, is that right?
That is correct.
And now with respect to the detention basin, I think I already asked you this, we're not changing that, right?
That is correct.
All right, unless the township asks us, correct?
That is correct.
All right, and you know you have a neighbor to the side of your property, right, who has I believe, an office building, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and for that neighbor, you know, obviously right now, they're used to this being an empty property. You'd even be willing to install a row of evergreens along your shared property line in order to provide a bit of a buffer for that office building, is that right?
That's correct.
And you'd be willing to make that a condition of any approval here tonight?
That's correct.
So, and if any of the neighbors behind you, if any of those neighbors ask for, let's say, a little bit of a buffer by your rear property line, a nice row of evergreens, you'd be willing to do that too, correct?
Correct.
So with respect to the variances, obviously you're gonna let Heath take the honors on most of those, is that right?
Yes.
That's why you're paying him the big bucks. So I'd like to discuss one in particular, which is our request that you not have loading docks. Does your business need designated loading docks?
No.
Is that because you don't really get deliveries that often?
No, we get deliveries, but put it this way, if I get a delivery, I have to schedule it because no one's at the shop. So they have to tell me when they're coming, you know, so I can have somebody at the shop to meet them, you know.
Because no one full-time is gonna be working there, correct?
Correct.
All right, and with respect to those deliveries, generally, is it just panel vans that show up, FedEx, UPS?
Yes, yep.
Something like that?
Yep.
So because you're not getting these big rigs coming, dropping off anything, you don't need loading spaces, correct?
That's correct.
Now, in the future, obviously, if the day comes when you sell this property, not having loading docks, that means that anybody who wants to buy the property or move into the property in the future, they can't have a heavily trucking-intensive business, is that right?
I would assume so, yes. Yep.
Because you're not gonna have the loading docks that they'd require, correct?
Correct.
All right. So in the future, this basically not having those loading docks will help ensure that Wilson Avenue here doesn't become overburdened by truck traffic because of your little property here. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
All right. So as you know, as I'm sure you can see, there's quite a few of your neighbors here tonight.
How you doing?
You know that they probably have some concerns about your property or about our proposed development here, right?
Yes.
And obviously you're willing tonight to listen to those concerns, correct?
Yes.
And to the extent possible, any suggestions that your neighbors have, a way to make this project a little better, you'd be happy to consider those, right?
Sure, that's what we're here for.
And if we can, to implement those in your project.
Yes.
And if this board has any questions about, to you, to Mr. Dumack, or to me, if they have any suggestions, if they have any input, we'll consider that too, correct?
That is correct.
Because you want to try to be a good neighbor and try to work with your neighbors to make this something that works for everyone. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
All right. So at this point, if the board has any questions for Mr. Tepper, we'll be more than happy to try to address those.
Just want to be clear, on the loading docks, that's also a condition of approval that he will not seek in the future to install loading docks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think Mr. Panzer might have them. I'm not sure if Mr. Panzer has any questions.
I don't get the loading dock thing. Can you, like, why not the second one? I don't. I know you don't need it, but if it's a condition that, a variance you don't need, why would you?
Well, I think Mr. Dumack might be able to mention that. It's not exactly.
It's not, I apologize.
I didn't know what to take your statement as, whether you're just saying you're not going to seek it now, or you're never going to seek it, or you want it to be a condition. You don't.
No. So
That's up to the board, really.
we are asking for a variance from that so that we do not have designated loading spaces. That is the request.
Okay.
You know, that's something that the ordinance requires warehouses to have. Our business does not need one.
I understand that part of it, but that's one less variance you would have to get if you put both loading docks in. Am I correct in that, or?
You're correct. But it's the type of thing that we think would be beneficial to the property and would potentially address some concerns that I think maybe nearby businesses might have. We think it's the type of thing that actually, at the end of the day, will help. But you're right. I mean, we could technically install 2 loading spaces, but I don't want to sound corny here, but we think this is something that actually will benefit people and will benefit some concerns about potential truck traffic in this particular area or nuisance.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Colleen, any questions? Okay, continue.
All right. All right. So if there are no questions, at this point, Ms. Tomac.
Question or two, please. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Tepper.
How you doing?
Good, thank you. You understand that I represent Mr. Fred Ramirez, Pan American,
Yep,
and that they're an immediate adjacent property owner?
yes,
You know his building, right?
yep,
Okay. There are a number of neighbors here, but I don't represent them. You understand that?
you got it.
Okay, thank you. With regard to that basin that's on your lot, you acknowledge that it is in fact on your property, yes?
Yes,
And are you aware that that basin supports stormwater runoff from more than just your property?
correct. That's one of the reasons why Dumac can address this, but we're building our own retention basin so that even the material that's going into that basin of ours, we're now going to put in a separate basin so nothing will be added to that basin, probably subtracted, if any.
So if I understand what you just said, you're going to leave the existing basin as is and build another stormwater basin on your property to address the additional impervious surface that comes with your proposed building and other improvements, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Have you seen a maintenance agreement with regard to the existing basin?
No, I have not.
So do you know what your responsibility is as a property owner with regard to the basin that serves multiple properties surrounding you?
No, I'm not.
I'll defer any additional questions on the basin to Mr. Dumac, but with regard to screening, Mr. McGuigan, your attorney, indicated that you are willing to put screening plantings between your proposed building and adjacent properties which requested, presumably, yes?
If that's what he would like, yes.
Have you prepared any type of sketch landscape plan to date?
I'd have to defer to the engineer on that one.
All right. I'll wait for Mr. Dumac on that. Okay, I think that's all I have for you. Thank you, Mr. Tepper.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, the applicant would like to call Mr. Heath Dumac.
Yes, ma'am. I do.
All right. Heath, do me a favor, please introduce yourself to the board and tell them where you work.
Good evening. My name is Heath Dumac. I'm a professional engineer and land surveyor. I've been doing this basically for 34 years, practicing specifically in the Bucks County area. I'm the president and owner of Dumac Engineering.
He's a recognized expert. He's been in front of us many times.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman. All right.
Sorry.
First test passed. All right. Heath, is it fair to say that you're familiar with the property that we're here for tonight?
Yes, sir.
And is that because you prepared the plans for this project?
Yes, sir.
All right. If you could, why don't you briefly just take the board and take the public that's here tonight through the plan and let them know what they're looking at.
Sure. Can we go back to thank you. What we have here is a site that's on the east side of North Wilson Avenue. The site as existing has a surface retention basin, and to the east is a paper street that is 50 feet wide. There is extensive vegetation that
runs basically from the southeast towards the northwest. It's, I would call it scrub brush, trees. I wouldn't call it primary or first growth. I would call it secondary growth. What we're proposing is a 10,000 square foot warehouse building, trash enclosure, parking for the facility itself with two driveways to service the facility, and at this point, underground detention-retention basin on the western side of the property closest to North Wilson Avenue.
All right, thanks for that, Heath. Now, question, this site, I mean, you said you've been doing this for 34 years. Fair to say that, in your experience, this site is a bit unique?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, and is part of that reason the fact it's essentially bifurcated?
It is two different parcels of ground. This all came about due to a subdivision and land development that occurred in 1997 here in Bristol. We can go to those screens if you want.
Sure.
If you go down, I believe 3, it'll go to the old J.G. Park plans. That's the first one. That's okay. This is the first one, which was the subdivision that created these two parcels and the North Wilson Avenue right-of-way. This was performed back in 1997 by J.G. Park. If you go to the next screen after that, it also documents, this was a land development plan that was submitted. It was, I think, approved in either 98 or 99, which had the existing building here, and then the parcel that we represent. At that time, it was a office building with parking. It actually cleared the majority of the lot, and you can see, I'll call it the eastern side, closest to the paper street. They had parking within 3 to 5 feet of the property, and this was a fully approved plan recorded up in Doylestown.
So let me ask you a couple questions about this. So for those in attendance who do not have the land development zoning experience that you do, when you say a recorded plan from 1997, does that mean fully approved by the township, almost ready to pull permits and build, but it just never happened?
Correct. It was, I believe, close to shovel-ready at the time, but the design for this lot was never constructed.
And it's a little small in there, but what you're saying is, and if anyone wants to go up and take a closer look, there was a building that they proposed together with expanded parking that was approximately double the size of what we're proposing, and the parking went nearly to the rear property line, all the way to the property line.
That is correct. And at the time, the resource protection ordinances for this township were not in place back in 97 and 98. There were no restrictions for woodlands disturbance. You could basically, and I apologize, clear cut a site, 100% of the site. In, I believe, 2001, they implemented resource protection standards, which limited how much of the woods that you can disturb, what the buffer setbacks needed to be, et cetera. So this site, as is, at the time required no zoning relief whatsoever.
So the resource protection ordinances, which we're requesting relief from tonight, those didn't exist back in 97 when this was approved by the township, correct?
That is correct.
Right. And if they did exist back then, would this plan have been able to be approved without a variance?
No.
Right. And with respect to those resource protection ordinances, well, why don't we go back to page 2, Bob, if you can. So just so everyone knows, when you say resource protection, what resource protection areas are at issue right here, if you can point them out to everybody?
Sure. Hold on. Can I walk with this? What we're talking about, basically, the detention or stormwater system is in here. What we're talking about is the wooded vegetated areas that come across the smaller parcel, and then you can sort of see, based on the aerial, that it cuts diagonally across our subject property. And what you're looking at is a combination of woods, shrubs, vegetation that isn't virgin or first growth.
All right. Bob, if you could go to page, I believe, 5. All right. So Heath, together with all those resource areas that you mentioned, together with the 100-foot required setback for the warehouse from the residential district, what are we looking at here? What would be essentially buildable if we couldn't get this relief?
If you can see it, and I apologize, my eyes are bad, this dotted line, or unique geometry in here, that with the current resource standards, the 100-foot setback, you're looking at a very, very small, for 1.3 acres, you're looking at probably about 12,000 square feet is what's buildable.
So that's technically the building envelope that we're dealing with.
Yes, sir.
And that was not the building envelope back in 1997 when the subdivision created our parcel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and that's the total building envelope. So building, you got to put parking, any accessory structures, all basically in there. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is a property that's zoned M2 industrial. Is that to your knowledge?
Yes.
With this zoning, I mean, you've been doing this 34 years. Can you put an actual industrial structure in such a limited envelope?
In my experience, no.
All right. So with that in mind, let's go back to page 2 and let's talk about exactly what we're proposing here.
That would be the aerial photo. Thank you, sir.
Or it might be easier for page 3. It's kind of tough to... sorry, Bob. All right. So instead, this is what we're proposing. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So 10,000 square foot warehouse with some accessory parking areas, and we're maintaining as much of the vegetation and that detention basin as we can, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, we're maintaining the whole detention basin, and we're not really touching that. Is that right?
If we have to touch it, it would be to improve it.
All right, what do you mean?
And the basin will have to be brought up to current township standards. The township engineer will review it to make sure that it does work and it functions properly. I would imagine that if there is no operations and maintenance agreement for the basin, that the township engineer will require it of the owner as part of this development.
All right, and obviously that's something that we're more than happy to enter into, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So with respect to stormwater, you just mentioned it, so that we don't over encumber that existing basin, what have you designed?
Well, at this point, it's still conceptual, but we have an underground detention, retention system just to the west of the parking area. It hasn't been fully sized and analyzed and designed at this point, but we will have to meet all the township standards. Township engineer will be reviewing the stormwater calcs. We'll have to do infiltration testing. Calcs. Calculations. Thank you. Infiltration testing, that will all be monitored by the township engineer.
All right, appreciate that, thank you. Now, looking at this project here, let's back to the general scope of the development. By going with a structure that's 10,000 square feet, that's generally smaller than the building coverage that you could build on a lot like this. By doing that, it allows us to maintain all of the general setbacks that would be required of a similar structure in the M2 district. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
However, because of the unique configuration of the lot that you just went through, regarding the fact that there's 2 separate, essentially, plots of land as part of this, regarding the detention basin, regarding the wooded areas, we do need some relief. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go through some of that. So the first variance that we're asking for is to allow this property, to allow our warehouse to be 30 feet from the property line rather than 100 where there's a residential district nearby. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain why we need that?
Sure. Wood Street, while it is a paper street and obviously not developed, Wood Street is part of a residential district. The other side of Wood Street, and if we go to sheet 2, thank you, sir, you can see the residences in the background, which would be to the east of our project site. Because of that, we have to have, or required to have, based on zoning, a 100-foot special setback from a residential district. It doesn't count For the east side of the paper street, we have to measure it from the property line, which is the west side of the street.
So, but you'll agree with me that even though we can't accommodate 100 feet just because of the nature of our property, there will be a significant natural buffer between our building and the neighboring residential properties. Is that right?
Yes, sir, you're looking at a minimum of approximately 80 feet.
All right, and that includes that 50-foot paper street, correct?
Yes,
And we're not touching that as part of this.
we are not touching that.
And then we're going to have an additional 30 feet from our property line to our building, correct?
Yes,
And we're going to keep that as wooded as humanly possible. Everything, as long as it doesn't interfere with the construction, the maintenance of our building, it's going to stay wooded. Is that right?
that is correct.
And we're not going to make any changes to that area unless the fine people at the township ask. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So the next variance that we're asking for actually relates to that wooded area, to allow some of the existing vegetation to remain and to also, in that buffer, and to allow us to remove some of the vegetation near the site of our construction. Is that correct?
That is correct. Can we go down 2 sheets to the landscaping plan? Thank you. And this documents the approximate vegetation line, and what we've proposed is shrubs to infill the woods that are in there. And as you notice, the building is, we've kept the vegetation as close as possible to the proposed building.
Right. And that actually dovetails nicely into the next variance that we're asking for, which is to have the building setback lines measured from the property line rather than the protected resources.
Yes, that is
And
correct.
I know you've already discussed it, and I think it goes to page 5 of the PowerPoint. It's just the lot isn't buildable unless we get that relief. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, that's the type, that's an ordinance that did not exist when this lot was created and this lot was approved. Is that right?
That is correct.
And obviously, the applicant didn't have anything to do with passing that ordinance. Is that right?
No,
And similarly, the applicant didn't have anything to do with the fact that this property looks the way it does.
that's correct.
And the applicant didn't have anything to do with the detention basin that's there or the existing woodlands.
That's also correct.
All right. Let's discuss the last variance here, which involves the loading spaces. Can you explain to the board and to the public why we don't need those, why we're not asking for those?
Well, I think the owner did a pretty good job of it. However, if we can go back 1 or 2, yeah, 1 slide. Thank you. The building itself is going to be built at grade. We're not building it 4 feet up. We're trying to balance the site, trying to keep fill import to a minimum. The site itself, while it has a positive traffic flow in and out of the site from North Wilson, there is no need for this use to have loading spaces or loading docks. As you heard from the testimony of the property owner, the use of this building really is almost cold storage. There's not going to be day-to-day activity there. So a loading space seems superfluous, given what the use is.
And also, not having that loading space, obviously that would work in the future to ensure essentially that a potential trucking heavy or delivery heavy operation can never go here. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that would obviously potentially ensure that this property doesn't help to over encumber Wilson Avenue.
That's also correct.
So if there's issues with truck traffic on the street, it's not going to be because of us. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's one of the reasons why we're here asking for this variance, because we think it actually helps to improve the property and prevent potential nuisance.
Yes, sir.
So, in your opinion, as the engineer on this project, as someone who's done work in the Bucks County area for 34 years, is this the minimum relief that we need to reasonably use this property?
Yes.
All right. And is that because of the unique orientation and layout of the property?
Yes.
Is that because of the existing natural resources?
Yes.
Because of the need to maintain, which we will do, the detention basin?
Yes, sir.
And in all actuality, when factoring in our coverage ratios and setbacks, we're essentially underbuilding this lot.
Yes.
And the reason why that's somewhat necessary here, not only as a practical matter, but because the condition of this property, the the law regarding this, the ordinances that apply to our property have changed since it was initially created, mandating this process.
Yes, sir.
All right. In your expert opinion, is there any reason why we sit here today, why this development would be detrimental to the surrounding community or to Bristol Township?
No, sir.
All right. And in fact, like I said, the proposed development likely underdevelops a lot from a building coverage and impervious surface standpoint. Right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's because this is truly the minimum that we can do to reasonably use this property for a permitted industrial use.
Again, yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Dumack. If the board or Mr. Panzer has any questions.
Panzer?
Good evening, Mr. Dumack.
Good evening, Mr. Panzer. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
First of all, are you aware whether this proposed plan has proceeded before the Bristol Township Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors?
Not yet. It has not.
And you would agree with me that it's a land development and therefore will go through that land development process?
Absolutely.
And during that process, issues like stormwater management and landscaping will be addressed.
Yes, sir.
With regard to the size of the building, a 10,000 square foot building is proposed. Relief is necessary at a minimum for the 100-foot residential buffer, yes?
Yes.
Should the building be reduced in size, in theory, the scope of relief could be reduced correspondingly, yes?
I would politely disagree with you. And the reason I say that, could we go 2 slides forward? Oh, that's it. So if we were to follow the 100-foot special setback for residential development, the building itself would only be able to fit by right within this small envelope. If we were to, I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. If what that would probably require is additional zoning relief in order to fit a building within that region in there, more relief would be necessitated to have a design that would reasonably work for what the client wants to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think you misunderstood my question. I didn't propose that you meet the 100-foot setback from the paper street to the rear of the building, but that you shrink the depth of the building and therefore shrink the need for buffer relief.
If we shrink the building, it's no longer a viable site.
And that would be by the applicant's desire to have a 10,000 square foot building.
I would politely disagree, given the fact that 25 years ago, it was fully approved for a building and parking area.
But the request for a 10,000 square foot building as opposed to an 8,000 square foot building is based on the applicant's desire, based on the applicant's considered use. Yes?
I think if you, I think if you changed it from 10,000 to 8,000 square feet, we would still be sitting here asking for the same exact relief.
So making the building smaller wouldn't give you the opportunity to push the rear of the building line further from the rear lot line. Is that your testimony?
To adjust it by 2,000 square feet, we would still be in violation of that 100-foot setback.
You mentioned the fact that the subdivision plan was approved, was it 1997?
Between 97 and 98, yes.
Based on your knowledge and experience, you're not asserting that there's some type of vested right. Instead, you're relying on the variance standard, yes?
I don't know what the variance standard is. That's more legal than engineering, so I'll have to politely shrug my shoulders on that one. Can you rephrase the question?
No, you've pretty much answered it.
Okay.
Beyond your scope. You talked about the paper street. Paper street was created at the time of the subdivision, yes?
Actually, I think it was before that.
Oh.
It may have been in existence before the subdivision in '97.
And based on your review, you're aware that the applicant does not in fact own the paper street, right?
No one does at this point.
Do you know what the paper street is zoned?
I'm assuming, our assumption is it's residential. The special setback goes from our property line forward towards us based on the fact there's a residential district next door.
And that's why you measured from the rear lot line, which is also the line that's shared with the paper street.
Correct.
And normally it would require 100 feet, and you're providing 30 feet on this property.
Correct.
That landscape plan, would you pull that up again?
Two up. One more. There we go. Yes, sir.
What buffering has been proposed, at least at this stage, between the subject lot and the Pan American lot, which is to the right, plan right?
I don't believe much of anything at this point. Something could be required or mandated here as part of the zoning hearing board decision, or through the land development process, which is next.
And with regard to that basin, you've been on site, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've been on site, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Many times.
Based on your review of the documentation and your physical observations, or your observations of the physical property, you'd agree that that's a regional basin serving multiple properties, yes?
I believe it services not only this parcel, but this, as well as, if I remember correctly, the North Wilson Avenue. I don't believe it services the lot across the street, which is the industrial use. And we did the design for the Kohler site, which is here, and they have their own storm system. So that basin really realistically manages the street and the two parcels.
So you understand the concern of the folks with regard to maintaining the basin in at least its current operational level?
Yes, sir.
Those are all the questions I have of Mr. Dumack. Thank you.
Mr. Dumack, if you had an 8,000 square foot building, it's on, but I wasn't close. If you had an 8,000 square foot building, you'd still need relief, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What would the impact be on the activity if, even though you would still need relief, how would it impact the activity surrounding an 8,000 square foot building versus a 10,000 square foot building? Meaning, would it do anything to address the concerns of the type and scope of activity that would go on that property if it were 8,000 square feet?
Realistically, my opinion, no, it wouldn't do anything to improve zoning relief or reduce the zoning relief. Recognize, this is the 10,000 square foot building. If we remove 3 to 4 foot off the back and make it a narrow building to make the 8,000 square feet, we're still in violation of that 100-foot setback. We're still disturbing woodlands. We're all the items that we're asking for relief on, we're still going to be asking for the same relief.
Mm-hmm. My question went more to the activity, the volume of activity. Is it going to impact it that greatly, or?
No, not
Somewhat,
realistically,
not at all?
no. I think that's a little subjective. I wouldn't be the one to answer that, but realistically, I don't think it would.
And in terms of legalities, I know you're not an attorney, but do you, within your purview of expertise, do you distinguish between de minimis and non-de minimis dimensional variances?
Yes, I do, and neither of this, either 10,000 square foot or 8,000 square foot, would be de minimis. Is that realistic?
In other words, you're seeking essentially, even though there's buffer in between the setback lines that you've all testified to, do you agree that the variance you're seeking is not de minimis?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I have a few questions in response, if I may. Heath, when this lot was created, is it a fair statement to say that there was a use envisioned and approved for this property?
I would say yes.
All right, and that appears, based on the approved subdivision plan, to be something that's akin to an office space with parking.
Correct.
All right, and the parking that was approved, it's significantly more than what we're proposing, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
In fact, the use that we're proposing, in your opinion, is our use a less dense or impactful use compared to what was actually approved by the township many years ago?
My opinion, yes.
Right. And you were asked some questions about the size of the building. Is your testimony that this 10,000 square foot structure, that this is the smallest size that works on this property, that's a reasonable use of this property?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the property itself, we've discussed it, but I just want to reiterate, it is a zoned industrial property, is that right?
It is.
It's not residential,
Nope.
not commercial,
Nope.
not zoned professional or office space,
Nope.
zoned industrial.
Yes, sir.
So when we say a 10,000 square foot building, it's a little different than saying a 10,000 square foot house, is that right?
Yes, sir.
A little bit. And in terms of this property, it's a 1.59 acre property, is that right?
Yes, sir.
If let's say we do an 8,000 square foot building, is an 8,000 square foot industrial building a reasonable use of 1.59 industrially zoned acres of property, in your opinion?
It should be maximized further.
All right, so,
Larger building.
and in this particular case, the variances and the type of relief we need for an 8,000 square foot building or a 10,000 square foot building or whatever size, still going to be generally the same sort of relief, is that right?
Yes.
And this is the least amount of variances and least possible relief that we need to reasonably use this property so that Joe can move his business there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Panzer?
I'm going to share the mic with you, is that all right?
No problem.
Mr. Tepper purchased the property as we see it today, yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board, Mr. Dumac? Bob?
Nothing, Jim.
Done?
So with that, based upon the exhibits and testimony introduced, the applicant will rest. And I would just like to reserve a moment to address any questions or comments that are raised by the audience.
I do have one curiosity, Mr. Panzer, at any point, you're gonna call your client up to say why he's for, against, or why he's against this project, or you weren't planning on doing that?
I didn't intend to present Mr. Ramirez this evening.
Okay.
I can articulate his concerns,
Okay.
which are basically general concerns. They speak to stormwater and screening primarily.
Okay.
And initially, he was concerned because he didn't understand the scope of the relief. He has a better appreciation for that now, but he still remains concerned with regard to stormwater management, maintaining that regional basin, and screening. With that said, I mean, I can make a closing argument, but I'll wait for everyone to speak first.
Okay,
For the
thank
next
you.
question?
All right. All right, so now that the fun part begins. All right, so, okay, this is the audience's part of, the residents' part of the meeting. I'm begging you, please, okay? Let's have some decorum, respect. I'm not saying you got bad people. I'm just saying sometimes people get heated, things are said, and we're not here to make any derogatory remarks against anybody, and when you do come up, make sure the green light is on the microphone. So raise your hand if anybody would like to come up. Ma'am?
I can speak from where I am.
No, you cannot, ma'am, you have to come on up.
Come in, get sworn in, come on up. It's like the Price is Right.
I apologize.
Take your time.
I apologize for interrupting you earlier. I was just going to ask that the gentleman repeat the 2 or 3 variances. He was talking a little quickly for me. These things happen.
Can I have your name, please?
Kathleen Hamilton Cummings.
Can you spell it, please?
All of it? Certainly. Kathleen. Hamilton, my maiden name, Hamilton. Cummings is my married name, Cummings. I am the proud wife of Officer Lieutenant Cummings, whose death was ruled a fire department in line of duty in Philadelphia. I am here because I am the daughter. Okay. I just want to explain why I'm interested in this, that's all.
Is the green light on the microphone?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you raise your right hand, please?
I didn't want to
Do
do
you
all this.
solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I am here in the interests of Mrs. Stella DeSabato Manna, who is a member of a longtime family here in Bristol. She owns the home at 52 Poplar Avenue. I am the daughter of her sister, Yolanda Hamilton. Yolanda DeSabato Hamilton. So that's why I'm here tonight. I have 2 questions for you, possibly 3. Number 1, I guess I should address this to you. How many vehicles could you say for fairly sure residents would be seeing coming in and out of this establishment over a period of, say, 5 years?
Over 5 years?
Well, what I'm trying to say is how many vehicles per day could we expect to see?
Well, I would say it depends, but ultimately it's not going to be very many. By way of example, so Joe only has 10 employees currently. 6 are stationed at long-term operations off-site. So 6 for the next several months will not be coming to the property really that often, if at all. The 4 who do will potentially come in the morning to pick up some items that are stored in the warehouse and go to their job. They might come back at the end of the day. They might not. They might just go straight home, because all of Joe's employees maintain their vehicles and keep their vehicles at their homes. So generally speaking, you are not going to see a lot of vehicles coming and going each day. You're going to see a couple, maybe, but really not all that many. So over an expanded stretch like that, I'm really bad at math, but I'll tell you, it's not going to be a whole lot. And that's one of the strengths that we feel about this business here, is you're really just not even going to notice it, apart from seeing the building there.
So you're talking about, if I get too loud, let me know. You're talking about 4 vehicles per day in and out of there?
Sure, let's just call it 4.
Okay, and his response is on the record, ma'am? Thank you. Okay, thank you for answering that. My next question has to do with similar type of projects. I guess I'm addressing the solicitor here, if he doesn't mind, and then if I'm addressing something I need to address you alone, then I'm sure you'll be happy to inform me of such. Regarding the similar projects in this area or close to this area, would the residents of Landreth Manor be permitted to examine the change of housing value in areas that have had a similar type of situation? We'd like to see that change of value for 5 years afterwards, if we
Nothing
could.
I could not opine on that. It's not a legal question. It's really a real estate question, an appraiser question. So I have no idea.
Real estate has rule of law, last time I heard.
It's not appropriate to ask me that question,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Okay, so,
I mean, you could ask it, but I can't answer it.
no problem. I think that is mainly the concern of a number of people sitting here. Now, I'm not sure, and if it isn't the concern, someone will let me know, correct? Okay. My feeling is people who have invested their time and efforts in this area as citizens of this community should have the right to have some knowledge in this area. Could we have some time to consult someone and just ask how this would affect our property value?
I don't know whether or not it would be appropriate at land development, but there's still another phase of this. So if the residents want to try to retain an expert in real estate and bring this in front of the land development board, then you could try to make your point there.
Because, sir, to be quite frank, I would imagine that's the main issue here.
Well, yeah, our legal standard is whether or not there's a hardship that's been proven or not, and whether what the variance they're seeking is de minimis or not. That affects the legal.
And see, you're not defining could you pronounce that word again, if you would, so kindly?
Well, we already cleared up the fact that it is not a de minimis. It's not a small variance they're asking for. It's 70%, if you will, if you consider that you need a 100-foot buffer, and they're asking for 30, offset somewhat by the fact that there'll still be 80 feet of vegetation, if you will, between where they're proposing to develop the building and where the residential paper street starts. Or not starts, but through that paper street.
Okay, and that would be the third phase? I mean, that would.
There's no third phase.
I
I'm
mean,
just
that would
saying
be
there's another opportunity for neighbors to be heard if they're concerned about stormwater management or all the types of subjects that come up in front of land development, not zoning. So we're very limited on what we can listen to. I mean, we can listen to a lot, but what the board will take into consideration and make a decision upon, and what the opinion will read, is based upon certain legalities, which we take from the evidence that's presented. But one of those things is not whether real estate values drop. But we do have a concern as to the overall general welfare. The board always takes health, welfare, safety into account when it makes its decision.
That's comforting to know, and I hope it certainly will take all that into consideration when one considers that we are basically dealing with a percentage of the livelihood of the ladies and gentlemen who are behind me.
Fair enough. Anything else?
No, and I thank you for your patience and for your consideration. I'm sure that nobody was really expecting me tonight, and I appreciate your kindness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up, sir.
My name is John Andrews.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. A couple questions before I talk about the history of this for a few minutes. What's the height of the building?
20 feet.
20 feet?
20 feet.
Okay. And the building will use some of the space inside to do repairs that can't be done in the field?
Sure.
What kind of equipment? What are you repairing?
We might be bringing a shaft.
First, you're gonna have to give him that microphone.
I'm sorry.
Can everybody hear? Okay. So we might be bringing a shaft in that, you know, to be machined or something into the shop.
Okay. Without a loading dock, how will that get into the building?
Come the back of our pickup trucks, back of our trucks.
Okay. All right. Do we have a decibel reading at the property line for industrial businesses? Requirement?
Bob?
There is a decibel. If there's a complaint that is had, the police will go out and measure whatever the sound is that is.
So that's after the fact? Okay. All right. Back in late, in 97 or 98, it's deja vu for me because I was here before. But if we could implore you to put up the first drawing where it showed no development.
Right there, sir.
Prior to at that time, redevelopment building being built and the parking lot put in, the area was a complete buffer for the neighborhood. Once the redevelopment building was built and the retention pit was put in, there was a promise of shrubbery being built or put in and a barrier being put back. And today, you can ride along Wilson Avenue and see the back of the houses. So in 97, 98, 99, we did not get what was promised. And nobody's done anything since. Who owns the paper street? Township? Does anybody know?
The township owns the paper street.
Okay.
They
so-
don't maintain it. It's not part of the public roadways, but they would have to dedicate it out to somebody if,
So it could be developed. It could turn into a road.
theoretically.
So that, theoretically, a 50-foot of buffer would disappear.
I'm not sure.
I'm not
unless
sure,
it would-
yeah, but it's a
But it seems to
possibility.
me that the testimony tonight was, and Mr. McGuigan can address that concern, was that they intend to leave the paper street as it is with the growth on it.
But who owns it?
So, as far as I'm aware,
Yes.
when a paper street has not been developed like this, the township can either, technically speaking, before the township vacates it, nobody can do anything with it. If the township wants to vacate it, then half of it will go to each property owner on each side of the street. But if you ask me, and I think everyone here would agree with this, the odds that a road is put there are, slim to none. So that's one of the reasons why, again, this makes sense in this particular area because of that natural buffer that's going to be there.
Okay.
Trust me, speaking for myself here, I don't think the township wants to see all you guys at a council meeting opposing a roadway there. And if I were with you, if I were living nearby, I would be with you too, because that would be ridiculous.
Okay, so again, back in the late 1990s, a lot of the buffer between the neighborhood and Wilson Avenue was taken down, and some were put back. And I know most of you guys have been out there, but it's a small buffer, really hasn't done anything for the neighborhood. Small trees were put in, some of them died. There's been no maintenance of it. So I have no idea what your group is planning to put back there along besides evergreens. How big, how wide, how small, how many?
So as of right now, what our plan was coming here was we're not going to touch any of that. However, if the neighbors prefer additional reforestation there, additional plantings, when we're talking with the township, and after today, even if this is approved, this is not the end of the process. Sure. We have to go through a whole land development stage where the township engineer has to review our plans. They review it for stormwater, they review it for the landscaping, they review everything, fine-tooth comb. So if the township engineer wants us to add additional plantings, we will happily do that. We want this to maintain and to still be a buffer just as much as you do. And we'll put in the plantings and spend the money to do that.
Sure. So my whole position is we've lost some buffer a number of years ago. If you live in the neighborhood, you can hear a lot of traffic and noise on that road. We're going to take another 70 feet, 80 feet, a buffer away. The building will be making some noise. If they do machining of shafts, another type of equipment in the building, that's going to be heard. And I don't believe you're insulating the building.
I will be insulating.
Insulating? But there'll probably be noise coming out of there, and that's why I asked about the dB ratings. So that's our concern. That's my concern. And it hasn't really changed in 20 years or 30 years. We still don't have a buffer there for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Bryce, you want to address that any further?
Yeah, well, briefly, what I'll say is I drove by there the other day, drove through the neighborhood, drove right in front of the property too. I understand your concern. There were definitely spots where you can see through. And as a neighbor, to be honest, if I lived on the other side of industrial property, I'd probably want a really nice buffer there too. So I get why you're here, I get the concern. What I'll say to you is nothing short of if the township condemned the property and just kept it woods would really help that. what we can do and what we're gonna try to do is help it as much as we can, because at the end of the day, it's an industrial property. So we gotta do something industrial with it, and this is what we're proposing. And what I will say is that building there, it's generally, most of the time, there's gonna be nobody in it. So when you're concerned about noise, I mean, look, I'd be mildly concerned too. You don't know me, you don't know my client, so I get the fact that, you know, you're not sitting here just 100% taking us at our word. I get that. What I can tell you is this is an existing business. It's located right up the road, and he knows what he's doing, and people are generally not there. So what the building's mostly gonna be, just gonna be something that you'll see. You're not gonna hear anything from it, and if anything, it might serve as a bit of a buffer from the traffic on Wilson and that giant monstrosity across the street. But to the extent that we can provide extra trees in there to make sure that some of those gaps might be closed along our property in terms of what you guys see, we'll do it.
Well, I believe that there's no one here tonight that is opposed to improvements, increasing the tax base in the township, but it shouldn't be at the cost of the neighborhood, so.
Ma'am, come on up. All right.
Just real quick, just along with what he was asking about noise ordinance, what would the hours of operation be?
6:30 to 4:30.
Joe, Mike.
6:30 to 4:30?
And that's even for guys that have to take stuff back to the warehouse to work on it?
Yep,
and-
yep.
Okay,
9 times out of 10, that's what we got.
okay, thanks.
I got one question. So you might have stated earlier, this might not be for you, Mr. Temp, but you guys stated earlier that if this doesn't get built, say Mr. Temper wants to sell the property, because he can't build this 10,000 square foot warehouse, and he sells the property, so are you stating that there's nothing else that can be put on this property? I mean,
What I would say is, as far as an industrial use, I'm racking my brain for something that can go here. I'd have to look at the ordinance to see if maybe truck parking or something like that, but no one would like truck parking there. That would be terrible. So I'm not sure off the top of my head. I've been doing this, not as long as Heath, but I've been doing this for a little bit. And again, it's an industrial property, and that's the thing, trying to find something that's an industrial use that can be fit into such a small, tight building envelope, it's rough.
Bob, can you think of anything that would fit in M2 there? I mean, off the top of your head, I'm putting you on the spot here, but.
Just some permitted uses that are in the M2 is auto repair, which would cause a lot of noise, manufacturing. But as far as size, I don't think so, no.
Okay, all right. That's all, that's it. Yeah, come on up, man.
Hi, my name is Linda Andrews.
L-I-N-D-I?
Yes. No relationship.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Is the green light on?
Oh, yes. I have one remark and one question to this gentleman. Why would you buy a piece of property, invest in all the stuff you've done and the lawyer and all this, if you couldn't build anything there?
How do I know I can't build it?
You need a variance.
That's why I'm here.
So you purchased a property that you need a variance for.
Well, it was
What if you don't get the variance?
It
We're
was a-
supposed to feel sorry because he bought a piece of property he can't use. And sir, you said it right there. You don't live here.
No,
You don't live here. Everybody has been here for not 5 years. It's not a transient neighborhood. And we're supposed to feel bad because he bought a piece of property he can't build anything on? It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense, and you don't live here. This neighborhood is established, it's historical. It was the home of Landreth Seeds for generations and generations. People are living in the home they were raised in. And township just says, yeah, sure, we'll put up a bunch of tiers for this gentleman that should have looked for a bigger piece of property. Thank you.
not speaking for Mr. Temper here, but I'm sure he didn't know he needed the variances. I could be wrong. Did you know you needed the variances when?
All right, oh, it's okay. The point is, he bought the property and he's here for a variance. That's really what we're left with. So,
Come on up, man.
My name is Joya, Gioia, Chanchosi, Cianchosi.
Raise your right hand, please.
Pardon me?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Pull the microphone down to, there you go.
Okay, I'm very nervous to speak in public, but why do we have codes?
So people don't do stuff they're not supposed to do.
Pardon me?
So people don't do stuff they're not supposed to do.
Not supposed to do, but they're there for a reason. And to protect, I think, us, the neighbors. I think that the code's good, and I think you should uphold the code. Again, there's a visual. You say there's not going to be noise, but we have to look at the factory. That will devalue my property and my quality of life. I hope you deny the variance. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Hi, that's okay. Helen, Helen, Romano, Romano. I do. I was just wondering what the difference was between MER and Denali Company.
Microphone, please.
They're both the same
Oh,
owner.
sorry.
So,
Oh, for him.
They're both the same owners. I come from a single parent, so I don't have much. I have 5 kids. 4 of them work for me. And upon the time that comes to give them some of the business, the 2 different businesses was for that purpose, so they would.
The application for the variant was made under Denali Company. Is that a licensed company?
Yes, it is.
Where is that headquartered now?
At 38 Inwood Road in Levittown. I'm Bristol Township resident all my life.
Square feet is that?
That's my house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, in the back with the Eagles hat, you want to come up?
Hi, Robert Tressler, Tressler.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, you said in 1997, these variances were changed, is that correct?
no, so in 1997, that's when the initial subdivision occurred.
Right.
Sometime between 97, I believe the early 2000s, they added some additional ordinances to, smartly
Resource protection.
natural resources.
Correct.
Correct.
So they created it for a reason, to protect the homes, to protect the neighborhood, to protect the noise, protect the wildlife. You're asking for 70% of that to be taken away. That's too much. You need to find a new place. You knew when you bought it how much. Come on, I'm a businessman. I own my own company.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, we're not here to call.
All right, well, whatever.
All right.
One side of you were saying if you don't get it, it's unbuildable. So what has happened since 1997? Why wasn't it sold? Why didn't something build in there? Because it's unbuildable. So don't tell me you didn't know it wasn't buildable. You knew it. You needed the variance to get it done. That's all I have.
Come on up.
Chris DeCaro, DE CARO.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Yeah. Quick and simple. would-be neighbors, that's my house right there. And like, I'm just concerned for noise, lower my value, property value. I got kids. I know the paper road's there. I pretty much take care of the paper road because I've been told that's my job since it's there. So I do cut the dead trees down when they fall and everything else. So I don't, I'm just concerned for noise and, losing value. That's about it.
Yeah, Mr. DeCaro, if I may try to, yeah, no, it's okay. Let me try to address that, What I'll say is, again, you heard Mr. Tepper. People generally aren't going to be at this facility. So if your main concern is noise, which I would be concerned with too, this really is, I know I'm hearing sighs in the audience, but this really is something that would work there. The issue is it's an industrial property. So if we get shot down, you might have somebody else coming in here who does know maybe the history of the property, who does know that they need variances, and who does know, hey, I have 1.59 acres, let me max it out. And they might want to go through the whole process, appeals, whatever they have to do, just to build out the biggest thing they can and rent it out. We don't have a real estate investor here. We have somebody who wants to be a neighbor, who wants to live in the property. And I can tell you from my experience, so I do code enforcement work, and I know that somebody mentioned decibel levels and noise. If Mr. Tepper's business is one that's going to create that sort of noise, and he's going to be creating those decibel levels, then the township is going to be down his throat until he eventually moves out. He will not be able to operate there. So it's something you really don't have to worry about with him.
I agree with you. We did take into consideration when we bought the house 19 years ago, we knew it was commercial, industrial, but it was way over. So we didn't, now we're going to be looking at it. I'm sure it'll be beautiful or whatnot, but it's still a concern of ours.
Yeah, of course. And as far as property values go, I agree with you. And I think my opinion would be a little different if, we bought the property and let's say it was zoned residential and we're sitting there going, doesn't make sense to build a house, let's put a factory and let's get it rezoned. Then I would be completely worried, and that might impact your real estate value because when you bought the house, it was next to a residential property that now all of a sudden is industrial. But this property, it has been industrial for a long time. The fact it's been vacant probably speaks to a lot of the other issues, but the only thing I can tell you is, what we're trying to do here is something that I hope it's come through here. We're trying to build it with the neighbors in mind, do something that will have the least possible impact. And if you get a real estate developer or some speculative developer in there, you're not guaranteed that. In fact, you're probably guaranteed the opposite. So we're trying. That's all I can say.
You way in the back, sir. Come on up.
Evening. How are you? Ben Romanowitz.
Please spell your last name.
ROMANOWICZ.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do. How are we? Good evening. I was just curious, you stated that it would be used for storage as well? It would be mostly an unoccupied business?
Yes, but when you say storage, I'm not going to be charging people to store things or nothing like that. It will be storing my tools, my equipment.
At an unsupervised location after business hours? Because this is, I'm sure you're aware this is gaining a little bit of attraction, at least locally. My concern is that with a business of that size, because you stated that you refuse to look at maybe an 8,000 square footage building, there's going to be a lot of tools, metals, precious materials that could be targeted for theft. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but we're not that far from the city of Philadelphia anymore. And if you look around the town in certain areas, it's drawing in a lot of unwanted attention. Putting a warehouse full of materials in the middle of a neighborhood, I don't see that as being a positive thing. I'm a huge supporter of small business, but not when it comes to the point of refusing to redesign the size of your building square footage-wise, and to also take, like you said, 70% of the buffer that's already written in code.
Mr. Romanowitz, I think reducing the size of this warehouse It's not gonna change anything as far as the residents of this.
You don't believe that if you ask around this room, if you maybe made this building half the size, it may begin to...
Guarantee they're not gonna want it. Guarantee it. We don't want it at all. They don't want it at all.
Okay, well, I'm up here to express my concern, too.
You're right, absolutely right.
So,
Well, you stated that.
but what I'm saying is everybody's here trying to talk about being a good neighbor, and I'm not seeing that from both sides. Right? I mean, my concern now is that you were unwilling to even listen to the fact of shrinking the building. You said that the only other option that could possibly be used for was truck parking. And that's nonsense, because there would be no business there for truck parking to exist. So I think that was just to draw an unreasonable comparison between what you're trying to sell as what's going to be a quiet business to possibly the loudest business you could think of at the time.
Well, if I may, and I don't want to interrupt if you still.
Please do.
So the question with respect to that was, what could we do on the property given that the building envelope is so small?
The other acceptable answer is nothing.
Well, that's...
It's unusable land.
If the answer is nothing, then what that legally means is that the township has to condemn it, and they have to pay for the value of the property. If the township doesn't condemn property, then there has to be a legal use for it. So we're here trying to find that legal use. So like I said, when I was answering that question, I'd have to take a look at the ordinance. I'm not sure some of the other uses that would really work here, that would be practicable, but would also be actually doable based on the site. And there's really not much, because again, it's an industrial property.
I understand that. My other concern is that you're saying, well, it's going to be this size, this is what I do here. You've been in business for, you said, 9 years?
Yes.
I don't know many people in business, I don't know many successful businesses that they buy a property and they go, that's good enough. Businesses grow or businesses die. This is not going to be where it ends. I can't imagine that to be true.
Well, and to address some of your comments regarding the business, this isn't, like I said, something new. It's not something new to the area.
It's new to our neighborhood.
Mr. Tepper's business is just up Wilson Avenue, just down the block.
And he's doing well, I would assume?
No. Yeah, hang on. So his business, Denali, I think someone asked, is registered out of Mr. Tepper's home, but the actual MER has a shop down Wilson Avenue. So Mr. Tepper is very familiar with your general area. He operates his business currently. So, and with respect to your concerns with theft, that's, again, not an issue he's having now. And also, we do plan on locking the property too, so it's not going to be open all willy-nilly.
A lot of burglars use the doors. I get that. But like I said, my concern here is that this is not going to be the end of it. I feel like I said, no business is started to be okay. He wants to succeed, and I hope that that's your case. However, I think that there's a lot of people concerned in here that this is not going to be the end of the road. As you said, whatever happened in 1997, a lot of things have changed since 1997.
Yeah, and if let's say you're sitting there and you're right, this isn't the end. Let's say MER takes off and becomes the next big thing.
And I hope it does for him, just not behind my house.
And I understand that, but let's say he's sitting there going, I'm outgrowing this business, and he wants to increase the size. Well, he would have to come back before this board, and everyone in this room would get notice again. And you'd be holding his feet to the fire based on what we're telling you here.
My wife and I are some of the younger people in the area. We're newer. We've been here a couple of years. We're raising a family here, and I hope that continues to be the case. But this is one of the last refuges left in Lower Bucks County. I mean, it is what it is. So, I mean, I just hope that everybody can take it upon themselves to look at the big picture here. I mean, like you said, we all hope to be good neighbors, but.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Bob, at any point could somebody... And I don't know if you can answer this. At any point, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. At any point, can this be rezoned residential and they put houses on this property?
Yeah, it could, if it makes sense, not spot zoning. It abuts a residential area, so yes. Answer. Yes, it could.
All right,
Michael Downs, DOWNS.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Sorry to bother you guys, but I'm the house that lives like, if you see that pool right there, can I approach the?
Yeah, sure. No talking though, you can't.
My bad. So basically, there's my pool. This is your road that runs right through my yard and Chris's that we take care of. I can't tell you the amount of trees I cut down, just try to keep it nice because no one comes and does nothing for it. So the 50 feet here, and then you're saying 30 feet from that is literally like my backyard. And I know you don't want to talk about the value in your home, but honestly, if you put a warehouse right there, I'm pretty much screwed because you can see it. You know, it's an eyesore. It's not. It might not be pollution, but you can see it. You're gonna have lights flashing. And he keeps stressing this buffer thing. There's literally nothing there. There's no buffer. There's a bunch of bamboo, which just overgrown and took off, that I had to pay thousands of dollars to get it taken down, and then it grows right back. So my concern is just, you know, there is no buffer. If he's trying to get 70 feet, I mean, that's like, there's a reason nothing's been built there since 1997, because it's probably undoable. And I know he's got a business he wants to run and all that, but like they were saying earlier, the neighborhood is like older folks. It's like a real tight-knit group, and I got lucky to remarry, move in there, but where I'm at, I'm gonna be, it's just like right there. And there's no buffer. The little drainage system that they talk about, no one touches that. They don't do nothing to it. There's trash, the mosquitoes are overridden, give them my backyard. It's just a mess. So if they're not taking care of that now, they're not gonna take care of it in the future. And he keeps talking like this is gonna be a ghost building. No one's gonna be there. There's gonna be traffic, there's gonna be noise, there's gonna be lighting. You know, from my personal selfish standpoint, it's gonna ruin, you know, I put a lot of money into my house, try to keep it nice. And I think putting a building right in my back, literally in my backyard. You know, I'm a little upset now, but I know you guys, I wish I could show you a picture on my phone. Can I bring it up just to give you a visual? Because you probably don't. Real quick. I know you guys want to get out of here. Like you're living where I live. Probably a little bit upset. Sorry about that. All right, so this is like this black fence, which I had to put up because you're right, there is a road behind there. But I'm sorry, man. My black fence is literally the paper road that begins. That's my property line, which is ridiculous, but it's the paper road. Behind that, 50 feet, is the end of the paper road, which I take care of. Right between these trees will be his warehouse. So literally, like, I know you don't live there, but if you did, it'd be like, it's just upsetting. So that's my only point from a neighborhood standpoint. I hope you don't let them do it because 70 feet's ridiculous.
All right, if you keep your voices down, please.
Oh, damn, sorry, bud. So that's what I had to say. I appreciate your time. It's obviously not a buildable area, or people would have put stuff there, right? I appreciate the lawyers, big words and all that, but it's just not working.
All right, one or two more, sir.
William Baum, B-A-U-M. I would like to address the owner. What kind of building?
Well, you gotta raise your,
I'm sorry.
gotta sworn in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please speak into the microphone.
What kind of building is it that you're building? Is it gonna be a cinder block, a corrugated?
Well, that's open for discussion. If anything that would, we're in planning at this point, so anything that would appease anybody here, whether it would be a brown building, whether it be, not a white building, obviously, that would sign through, but if anything, we can do anything in this pre-planning, that we would love to plant trees, make it a cinder block building if you think that might help with noise decibel in any way, you know.
Someone earlier said it was gonna be a ground level. It's not gonna be elevated.
Well,
It's gonna be ground level.
it'll be a 20-foot tall building,
Tall.
but, yeah, but not elevated. It's gonna stay on the elevation, that
Stay
street
elevated.
elevation.
And you're not sure whether you're building it out of brick or metal or,
It's open to discussion. You know, if there's a reason that you think brick would help with the noise decibel, we'll build it with brick.
Denali is the same as that kind of company, or it's a different?
Denali is just a land company real estate that I own, just started up a separate company.
You just said it had nothing to do with real estate, am I right? You said he's not a real estate developer.
No.
So Denali is just the company that owns this. It's not, we're not a real estate investor, real estate speculator, or anything like that. It's one of the companies that Mr. Tepper owns. Just so happens that this property is in the name of that business, but he's not a real estate investor.
Well, what is Denali considered? It's considered Denali, what?
It's just another business that I started up.
What kind of business?
It's going to be the realtor for MER Industrial.
A realtor for MER
Holds the real estate, yes.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with construction? It's not an existing
No.
construction business?
It's the only asset in it.
And I heard you say earlier, if one of your employees are out, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm getting in here. If one of your employees are out on the job, they have to bring a shaft back to the shop, machine it down, get it correct, take it back. You're saying that if your employee's out on the job, fixing machinery, is it?
Yes.
What kind of machinery?
Anything from FedEx to a blacktop plant to concrete plant to any manufacturing facility.
Repairing machinery inside their facilities?
That's correct.
Or bringing parts back to yours to make repairs such as the shaft you said earlier?
Correct.
This means that you're also going to be doing machinery inside there? Machine work, doing cutting, lathing, and stuff like that?
We don't have any lathes or milling machines. We do have a press brake and we do have bandsaw, yes.
Do any of these require solvent or oils or stuff like that?
Well, the bandsaw would have a solvent, water soluble solvent, yes.
Want to walk out your front door and get the smell of solvent smacked in your face?
I don't know if that would be an issue, but.
I work with it. It's a strong smell. It smells a lot like kerosene and gasoline mixed
No, you're
together.
more than welcome to come look at my shop that I have now if you want. I mean, I'd be open to opening up to anyone who wants to see what's there.
It seemed to me like you were far pressed to try to influence us into believing that there was going to be no loading docks, right? However, if you're building a building on ground floor, whether you make it out of metal or brick or whatever the case may be, in order to make a loading dock after you've already been approved here, what do? Undo a couple screws on a corrugated building, now you got a loading dock wherever the hell you want.
I think we're talking two different terms for a loading dock. We're not unloading trucks and loading trucks. Will a truck come in once a week? My truck that needs a shaft unloaded out of a pickup truck? Sure. If you want to call that a loading dock, then that's a different.
Earlier, someone asked about this. Earlier, someone asked you about this, and you said your only thing you're bringing in there is a pickup truck. And you didn't address that person's issue at the time as to how's the pickup truck getting inside of the building?
It's driving in the building.
Through?
A bay door.
A bay door, also known as?
No, it's not.
No,
It's
come
not
on.
the same thing. It's not considered the same thing.
It's not considered the same thing?
Bob, speak of what they consider a loading dock when it comes to this variance, please.
A loading dock more designed with a ramp that a truck can back up with bump stops and unload like a 54 triaxle.
An overhead door is not considered a loading dock.
He's talking about a garage door that he could.
However, the garage door can be used the same as a loading dock as far as backing up big vehicles into this building, right?
Not according to this variance, it doesn't.
It's more design standards is what the variance is for.
I want to address you guys now. I feel like these guys are trying to manipulate the system a little bit here, not being 100% honest with us about what they plan on doing.
You can't say that. That's not.
I'm expressing my concerns to you
They're on the record.
as a Landreth Manor
This is
resident.
the hearing board, they're not up here lying, that's not, they can't. He's a lawyer.
I'm not saying that they're lying, but
Listen.
I'm saying
Ju-
they're manipulating.
Just the way that.
They're
just-
manipulating the words.
Yeah, listen, just the way there's a code, which has been pointed out, part of that code gives them the right to seek a variance. Pure and
Understood.
simple.
I'm
That's
not trying to
ma-
hold
Let me
nobody's
just
business
finish.
back.
That's not manipulation of the legal system. It's following the legal system. That's why they're here. They're entitled to request the variance. That doesn't make them people trying to skirt the law or not follow the law or not follow the code. To the contrary, that's exactly what they're trying to do. What I say, by the way, has no bearing. The board's going to vote the way they vote, but I just want to make it clear, while we're talking about codes, this is part of the code. That's why they're here.
I'm not trying to prevent anybody's business from expanding, but I don't want this in my backyard, so I'm gonna come up here and say what I gotta say to get rid of it.
That's a fair statement.
And another, what I was getting at, I'm not calling nobody a liar. It just seemed like they tried their best not to bring up those issues that I just addressed as far as the being able to go into any door. Doesn't have to be a loading dock, still gonna have truck activity. So I believe they're trying to make us believe that the things that are gonna go on there aren't gonna go on there. It's gonna be a storage facility. Nobody's gonna be there. If this man's worker is out on a job at 8 o'clock at night and he has to get something done so that the other person's business can be running by the next morning, that doesn't mean that his guy's not coming back there to Wilson Avenue, opening up that warehouse, going in there, grinding, cutting, sawing, whatever the case may be. In a warehouse, you could drop a wrench on the floor and hear it 3 blocks away because it just echoes. Air conditioning and heating on the roof. These people live right there. They're sleeping at nighttime. The air conditioner kicks on. And another factor is, like I just said, if his guy's coming back there 8 or 9 o'clock at night, most of the people in my neighborhood are sleeping. We got work in the morning. But because this guy's in there banging around, it don't have to be loud to wake up the dogs. You wake up one dog, you wake up all the dogs. This is what I'm saying. I don't want to oppose nobody's business growth. I'm trying to grow my own. But this is where we live. This is our home. If you count the amount of houses in Landreth Manor and the amount of heads here, there's a lot more heads here than there is houses. That means everybody's house is represented here today. And we all oppose. We don't want it. That's all I have to say.
One more. Come on.
Thank you. Another Andrews, Carol Andrews. Yes. Yes.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God. Sure. It is. I'm sure he's doing gonna do a wonderful business there. Everything's terrific. He moves in, it's wonderful. He moves out, the variance is gone, he's gone. Who comes in next? And what do we have to live with then? And that's what I'm worried about. He can sit here and he can say everything he's doing, and that's good. But the variance is gone. I have a building there. What can go in? The building's there now. It sells, something else comes in there. That's what I'm worried about into the future. So I'd like you to keep that in mind when you're deciding to get rid of the variance. Thanks.
Okay. Good, sir. Come on. No, the guy behind you, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's why I want to hear from him now.
Sure you did. First name Fred, last name Ramirez, R-A-M-I-R-E-Z.
You raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Fred Ramirez, and I operate Pan American Behavioral Health Services adjacent to this property. We've been there several years, many years. We purchased the property from the Bucks County Redevelopment Authority. We do group therapy there, individual therapy, and I'd like to think that we have beautified the area for our patients that are mental health patients. I simply have a general concern, which is, what a shame. It is a beautiful property there now. We respect our neighbors. I think I've heard all evening their legitimate concerns, like I have legitimate concerns about it. Do I have a specific concern about it? Well, just generally speaking, the area is wonderful. It behooves our patients, our clients that come from Bristol Township, as far away as Street Road also, everywhere. And I would hate to see the area just deteriorate because trucking, for example, that we heard here this evening, no. As it is now, we have numerous trucks going up and down that road every day. And we only operate there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and we hear it. We have had to put barriers because the trucks take the side fences away from us. And we see the wildlife there. It's wonderful for our patients. It's serene, and that was only my general concern. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we've heard just about enough, I think. I mean, we understand your concerns. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure. Come on, one more person. Why not? Let me guess, you're against it, right?
Can I have your name, please?
My name is John Mundy,
Can you spell your last name, please?
M-U-N-D-Y.
Thank you. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So, thank you for listening to the residents. It's unfortunate that there's any kind of conflict like this. I just have something short and simple to say. The concerns of the residents, particularly the people who live right next to the property, is very, very real. If they had a serene backyard, take away that buffer, and it will be much less pleasurable, desirable, valuable to live in their area. The ordinances and so on were formed for a reason. I would highly recommend you support them, stick with that. There is a process which everyone has worked with, and we appreciate you working with it, but my recommendation is for you to support the ordinance and don't grant a variance for this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, at this time, I'm going to need a motion from the board. What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to deny.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All right, I'm going to call the board. Colleen Dunn.
Yes.
Mark Marcus.
Yes.
Jim McMahon, yes. All right, look, before you guys go, I just, one concern here. Listen, my concern is that somebody may build something on this property. So, I mean, I hope you guys are.
We'll be back. We'll be back.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's right.
Listen, either way, it's getting appealed.
Oh, no, I need a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor?
It's getting appealed the other way, because they came very close to proving